I think this is a tandem one between Bill and I. We're going to continue on the topic of game management plays. I know we introduced a set of plays last week, which I thought were some good examples of what not to do in game situations. So Bill and I thought that would be prudent to share some more of those, because we found some more of those from the past NCAA season that would be worthy of discussion and things to do or not to do in game management situations. So we want to roll those. We can get into them and we'll give you our thoughts on some of those. Our first play is going to deal with clock management situations. And again, everybody's got to understand where we are in the contest. This is approaching the end of the half. There's 14 seconds to go. We have a one-score game, and we have a team on offense on their opponent's side of the 50-yard line, barely, but they are on their opponent's side of the 50-yard line. So away we go. We have scrambling quarterback. He gets out to the flat, out to the sideline, dumps off a pass that is complete in bounds to inside the 10-yard line. So our wing official will come down. He's say that the runner was down in bounds. He'll stop the clock for the first down. Our umpire hasn't even gotten to the inbounds mark, and the referee is winding the game clock. As you'll see here when Bill plays it again, 5 seconds to go on the spot. Our umpire hasn't even spotted the ball yet, and the game clock is running. I understand the whole thing about game management and time and length of games, particularly at the NCAA level, that they want to speed the games up, but that's for outside of 2 minutes. That's not applicable here. And obviously what happens is the inevitable is that time is going to run out in the half. And of course, the offense can't get the play run inside goal to go, and it's halftime. All chaos breaks loose. Coach wants to have discussion with crew, or the crew wants to have a discussion with themselves first. Referee sticks by his decision to wind the clock, and he says the half is over. Of course, coach takes offense to that, and they have a wonderful exchange into the locker room going into halftime. You got to know, especially if you're the referee, that when it's time to wind the clock and when it's not time to wind the clock. But, in this situation, our umpire hasn't even gotten to the spot, and the clock has already been wound, and the half has been allowed to expire. So you could have worked a perfect half up to this point, to continue the theme from last week, and you've thrown it all out the window here with your clock management. And of course, now you're going to have this unpleasant exchange all the way into the locker room, and it's not going to be a good second half, regardless of what you do in the eyes of, at least, of the USC coach here. And I'll let Bill throw his thoughts in here. Obviously, you've been a referee a lot longer than I have, and I know we've tried to speed up the game as much as we can, but there's obviously situations when that applies, and this is not one of them.
You can't stall, but you need to be deliberate when you get down under that 2-minute mark, especially in a competitive ball game. There was absolutely no reason whatsoever for this clock to be wound. So all the flack that they got on this one, that referee, he brought it on for himself and the crew. And what are you going to do? You can't go back and change it, but you sure can change the way you approach managing a game when you're late into a half. It was just mind-boggling that this clock was wound. And again, you do that at 12 minutes of the first quarter, you do that at 9 minutes of the second quarter, or it's 40-0 in the fourth quarter, who cares? But not in a competitive ball game here. This was totally mismanaged.
Our second play here is going to deal with penalty administration. This actually is a not too often seen scenario, but does bring up a good point that we all have to be cognizant of penalty enforcement situations, particularly fouls that carry over. So this is a bowl game. Obviously, we have a long run here for a score, and then the player who scored decides that he's going to tap dance it here along the end line with his teammates. So rightfully so, he gets flagged for unsportsmanlike conduct. Conversation with the coach, and they elect to take the unsportsmanlike conduct penalty to the succeeding kickoff. So if you remember the old arena football days, I'm sure Bill will, you have a foul in the bank per se. So we have a foul that's going to be carrying over to the kickoff after the extra point. But then during our extra point, something else happens. Our kick gets off, no problem. It's successful, so the PAT is good. We got a couple other guys that get into it, extracurricular activities. More flags are down on the play. And we have some more unsportsmanlike conduct penalties. So we have now the situation where the PAT is good. We had the unsportsmanlike conduct foul that was carrying over from the original touchdown, and now we have an additional unsportsmanlike conduct penalty, or in this case, two unsportsmanlike conduct penalties that have to carry over. So somebody on the crew needs to be cognizant that we have a unsportsmanlike conduct penalty that was carrying over from the score, and if we have another one, needs to communicate clearly to the referee that we have another one that can carry over, and they can all be enforced as long as they're on the same team. And that information needs to be clearly communicated to the offended coaches and to the referees so that he can make the announcement here. I think there was some confusion on this one as far as what was communicated to the referee and some uncertainty, and wound up making a piss poor announcement, which we didn't hear. And the moral of the story is on this one that you must be aware of fouls that carry over, especially if you have situations where multiple fouls can carry over on the play.
Yeah, if either of these, let's say that the one unsportsmanlike on the offense and then two on the defense, if they occurred after the same play, and it was happening in that same interval before they could decide enforcement, then those penalties will cancel each other. Okay, even if there's two on one team and one on the other, but these happen totally separate, and the decision was made to go to the kickoff. So now after the PAT, you have two on the defensive team. So you've got a 15-yarder to walk off against the kicking team, and then you have 30 yards to do on the receiving team. So it's an interesting scenario there, but just remember, these penalties, because they happened in two different intervals, they do not cancel.
Third one, the dreaded inadvertent whistle. So we'll take a look at this play. We've all unfortunately probably had one of these in our career, and if you haven't had one yet, you probably haven't officiated long enough. But we have a backwards pass here that is first touched by number 76. For some reason, our headline judge rules it to be an incomplete forward pass and has a flag down for illegal touching of said forward pass by number 76, which would be correct, presuming if the pass was forward. The crew has a discussion. A line judge is brought into the discussion. And ultimately, the ruling is made that it's a forward pass, an incomplete forward pass. And then they get together, and obviously the line judge, who has responsibility for determining whether the pass is forward or backwards, gives that information in, and the crew correctly comes up with the fact that they have an inadvertent whistle, and the touching by number 76 is not a foul, because it is not a foul for him to touch the backwards pass. But line judge, headline judge, that's pregame communication. Who's going to rule on forward backward passes? There was a lot of traffic in front of that headline judge, so it probably should have deferred to the line judge on the other side that's going to rule forward backwards. I would also say you live a lot longer if you would have ruled that as backwards pass, let it play out, and then if we have to come back and correct it to make it an incomplete forward pass, you would live a lot longer than to just kill it on the field. And then we have to get into this scenario where we have inadvertent whistle and an administration of an inadvertent whistle, and you got to deal with the inadvertent whistle for the rest of the game if you're the official that blew it, and you got to be able to put it in, behind you and move on. But obviously none of us like it, but just know that you got those situations. Probably there's one of those when in doubts that you can apply. Let rule it backwards, let it play out, and then let your cross-field official come in and tell you that we've got something different, because it's a lot easier to turn it into an incomplete pass than it is to administer this whole thing as an inadvertent whistle.
Excellent point on that. I give kudos that they, had the gumption and the strength to say we're going to go inadvertent whistle, because that obviously that puts egg on your face. But at the same time, when you kick something like this, you got to do what's right. So getting the inadvertent whistle in there was good. But again, a lot easier to rule a backward pass and change it to forward and incomplete than it is to go the other way. So
our next play is again related to clock management and timing situations. I know the mechanics manual tells us there's an official responsible for the official game time, but I know crew of 7, crew of 8, crew of 4, everybody has to be responsible for the game clock, particularly in situations under a minute where time is critical. In addition to that, we also have the situations with runoffs and whether runoffs apply. And at least on our crew, we have a crew member that is deemed to be the runoff specialist. That's one of the duties appointed by the referee before the season. And that crew member is responsible for knowing all situations where 10-second runoffs are applicable and interjecting themselves in when those situations arise. So it's always good to have that guy that can work all these 10-second runoff situations, and you have to understand. So here we have under 1 minute to go, and we have an injured team B player. We'll let Bill run the play. Not only do you have to know whether a 10-second runoff applies, you also have to know when it can be used. Video jumped around a little bit there, but we have an injured player for the defense. And the first thing we have to understand is before we even analyze whether we're gonna get to the result of whether we're gonna get to the 10-second runoff, is we have to know what the result of the play is. And in this case, we have Ohio State throws past that boundary. It's completed. The runner goes out of bounds. So the runner has stopped the clock. So that our 10-second runoff specialist should know that no runoff here applies, because the clock is stopped by virtue of the player going out of bounds. So no 10-second runoff applies here. Even if he was tackled in the field of play, it would have been the line to gain would have been met. So it would have been runner inbounds and the clock stopped because he made the line to gain. So again, we would not have a runoff because the line to gain trumps the injury. So anything trumps the runoff that stops the clock for reasons other than the injured player is the only reason that we're stopping the running clock. Interesting one here, and we get this situation often, is the snap versus the team timeout. And does the requested timeout get granted in time? So the play clock is running down. Shows 0 on your screen. You see at the bottom of the screen the line judge with timeout signal, and at least in our philosophy from our supervisor, and I'll let Bill comment as if it was different in his league, is we'll always trade a timeout for a delay of game flag. So that being said, we will give it if it's close enough to the requesting coach. We'll take his timeout in exchange for the delay of game flag. Just from an administrative perspective, at least for us, that foul goes on the penalty report, and it goes that it was picked up due to a granted charge team timeout. But if it's that close, back judge is not going to know that the timeout was granted, so you can't fault him for throwing the flag because he's working the play clock. But good communication here will come in. Line judge will say, I got the timeout before the snap, and we'll make that trade any day of the week.
Yeah, and the key thing is I don't care that the snap got off and it didn't look like it was in time. If you've recognized that that coach is requesting a timeout and you're acknowledging that, I mean, in your own brain, it doesn't have to be physically with a signal. You're acknowledging that, yeah, you asked for it in time. I don't care that the snap got off. We're shutting it down and there was no snap. We're granting the timeout.
And I think our last one here is an interesting one to talk about. This is a DPI and an inadvertent signal, and is that treated the same way as an inadvertent whistle? So let's let it run out. But we got a 1-point ball game with 23 seconds to go in the fourth quarter. So obviously this is a tight ball game, and the team on offense is the team that is trailing. But we get a flag for a DPI, and the pass is ultimately intercepted by the defense, and there is a return. And then we got some other action that takes place out of bounds. If you remember these guys from the first week, this is the crew that had the 6-minute discussion about targeting. Rightfully so. It's a DPI. There's no question about that. As far as it's a DPI, clearly he's not playing the ball.
It's a routine clock up where it is. And like you said, 8 seconds gives you a chance for 2 plays. 4 doesn't know.
But you've given an inadvertent signal. So do we go back and restore time to this point of the inadvertent whistle? Is the play dead?
Timeout signal was given during the play. So
Yep.
still defensive pass interference. So we'll have that 15-yard penalty. The game clock will be reset to 13 seconds. The game clock will start on the snap.
Because of an inadvertent signal from the officials, USC gets an
You brought this one upon yourself if you're the crew. So you got to be aware of what you're doing out there. But an inadvertent signal is no different than an inadvertent whistle. Obviously, it's going to leave a bad taste in everyone's mouth, particularly the Utah coach here, because if you remember from last week, was the victim of the disastrous 6-minute review in the first half, and now we've done this to him with 13 seconds to go in the game. But if you've worked the game, you made a great call for DPI there, and you threw it all out the window with an inadvertent signal. So know what you're doing out there on the field. And then ultimately, yeah, if you're replay and you have replay, you have to get involved in that situation, and rightfully time was restored back to where it was, and doesn't look good, but by rule it was handled correctly in the end, but it couldn't look any worse as far as a game management perspective. And that crew, they could have had 250 plays in that game, and the 248 of them were correct, but the 2 plays they had, that one and the one in the first half, and that probably is, at least from the eyes of their boss, is the worst game of the week as far as officiating is concerned.
Yeah, and I mean, we're not trying to be specifically critical of this crew, but I think if we all analyze our careers, we've all had a game where we just
Absolutely.
went, what were we doing out there? So what's your options when all that's over and you analyze it and you really, whether you beat yourself up or you have a beer and get over it, but you only have 2 options. One of it is give it up, quit, or your other option is to blossom and grow. Learn from that mistake and be better. Don't let it happen again while you're officiating the game, and do what you can to help other people so it doesn't impact their game. But if any of us say that we haven't ever been in a disaster or a train wreck, we obviously haven't been doing this very long. So, blossom and grow, bounce back from it.
So that's pretty much it.